Welcome to the Impatient Entrepreneur Podcast, a show where we hear from entrepreneurs and business owners who are chomping at the bit to make their mark on the world. I'm your host, Lauren Quidar-Cockrell. Now, let's hurry up and get to the good stuff. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I'm excited. Today, we get to hear from an entrepreneur's entrepreneur, Jenny Fielding from Everywhere Ventures. Jenny, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
I'm looking forward to it. So tell us, what do you do, Jenny? What is it, this magical thing that you do?
Yeah. Well, I like to say I'm both an accidental entrepreneur and an accidental venture capitalist.
Okay.
And what that means is really, I stumbled into both professions, not really knowing where I was going, but somehow ended up that way. So started off my career, pretty traditionally in law and finance. And then I got into the magical world of startups really by accident. I had a personal pain point, a problem that I wanted to solve. Mm-hmm. Didn't even think of it as a startup. I just thought of it as like, hey, I'd like to see the world look a little bit different. How can I make that happen? Mm-hmm. And so that took me on a really different journey into technology and into startups. And so I've been building and investing in companies for the last, 15 years.
That's amazing. Thank you for doing that. So particularly in your VC work, is there a type of niche that you have or your companies that you're looking to invest into?
Yeah, so I built 2 companies and I learned a lot of lessons along the way. I did some things okay and I made a lot of mistakes. And so I've kind of channeled that energy and those learnings into Everywhere Ventures. So we're a first check fund, meaning, your first institutional money that comes in. We write small collaborative tech checks, usually, with other local VCs, and we invest at the earliest stages of a founder's journey. The truth is we're generalists. We invest across many different verticals. At the early stage, we're really looking for people and the kind of characteristics that they have versus, specific areas, although there are some areas that we lean in a little bit more.
What are those areas?
Healthcare is one of them. Mm-hmm. We're big believers that our healthcare system can use, some transformation. Mm-hmm. And we believe that technology is a great way to do that. Our financial system as well. We think that there's really interesting new modalities for payments and transacting, and that, everyone in a way is building a commerce business in some ways if you're transacting. Mm-hmm. And the last one's really interesting. We call it the future of work. So what are those antiquated industries, or maybe they don't feel so antiquated today, but where do we think they're going, and how can we use technology to really make them more efficient?
Very cool. Okay. Well, I have lots more questions, but the first official question is, Jenny, are you an impatient entrepreneur?
I think so. I think, entrepreneurship and waiting around and being patient is probably not, what most entrepreneurs do. So definitely impatient. I started my career very traditionally in law and finance, and I was always, let's call it the agitator, right? The person that wanted to see things done differently and wanted to see it happen today. And that's just not, really how a lot of big industries work. Corporate America works. And so I definitely kind of learned that sometimes you have to kind of step out of that if you want to affect change.
Absolutely. You work with a lot of, I'm sure, very impatient entrepreneurs, especially if you're giving people their first check. They've got big ideas. They're ready to boil the ocean or whatever metaphor they want to use. Like, do you offer counsel to them? Or are you stoking the flames? Like, what does that relationship look like?
Yeah. At the earliest stages, a lot of it is around product building and what your go-to-market is. And so, we spend a lot of time with our founders kind of helping them think through how they're going to acquire customers, what the product's going to look like. So we love spending time, with founders at that earliest point. And as they kind of move through the cycle, they, have more customers, they raise more capital. We feel like we've kind of launched them into the world. And then maybe our role changes a little bit, and we go from really close collaborators to kind of super fans and cheerleaders. So it's a really fun evolution, maybe kind of similar to how parents feel, where there's a lot of kind of oversight and mentorship at the beginning, and then there's a lot of cheering from the sidelines as things go.
Nice. What do you have a team? What does that look like?
Yeah, we have a team, as the name suggests. We are everywhere. So I have a wonderful co-founder who lives in Los Angeles, and we have a global team that helps us both on the sourcing and diligencing side, but also, our community. So what's unique about Everywhere Ventures is that we have 500 other founders and operators who've actually given us capital, and so that's the source of our pool of capital. So we don't raise money traditionally from institutions. We raise it from other folks who've gone through the journey, the founding journey.
Very cool. I love that. So, is there anything that you're impatient about right now?
Oh my goodness. Well, the world is a whirlwind right now.
Yes, it is.
I think the thing I'm most impatient about is, we've seen this tech downturn, which started in 2022. And I think there was a lot of hope that 2025 was going to be the year we'd see more liquidity come back into the system. And that would happen in the form of M&A, mergers and acquisitions, and IPO. And I am impatient about it because there are some amazing companies waiting on the sidelines for a better environment to go public. And I think many of us are really waiting for that to happen. We thought 2025 was going to be the year, but, as of, Q1, Q2, we'll see. So it seems like there's just a lot of volatility right now. And so people are retracting a little bit and probably wait a little bit longer.
What type of conditions would someone be looking at for an IPO?
Yeah, well, I think that one of them is, having the kind of tailwinds of regulatory support, which seemed like was kind of coming into fruition in this administration. So, traditionally, the way that the venture capitalists ultimately make money or an angel investors, there's some type of realization, right? So that can happen really in a couple of ways. The big one being the company goes public, the second one being that bigger companies scoop them up. And in the last couple of years, it's been harder for that to happen because there's been some regulatory headwind, shall we say, where there was a lot of oversight and a lot of red tape. And so I think, what people were excited about this year was some of that easing and an environment that was more friendly to these acquisitions. So we haven't quite seen it yet, but I'm still hopeful that on the M&A side, that can happen. Now, on the IPO side, we need, stability in the markets for sure and in the economy for people to feel secure that when they launch, when they do this initial public offering, that it'll be received well by the investment community.
Interesting. Okay, so switching gears a little bit, how do you fuel yourself as a leader? I find entrepreneurs almost to a single one to be very much autodidacts, reading or listening to books, listening to podcasts, going to conferences, what have you, just always, pouring into themselves to make sure that they're the best leaders they can be for their businesses and their clients and their team. How do you do that for yourself?
Yeah. So what's funny about me is I have a very extroverted job. And when you meet me, you think I'm an extrovert, right? Maybe I smile or I use my hands and, people think that that's extroverted. The truth is I'm an extreme introvert. And the way that I recharge and most introverts recharge is spending time by themselves. So, every couple of months, I will have a weekend where I don't talk to anyone. And most people think this is like super weird. I don't make plans and I just try to not read a ton or watch a ton of movies. I just try to let my mind wander, if that makes sense, and just start maybe downloading some of the stuff that, has been, has come in over the last couple of months. I mean, think about it. Every day I probably get pitched by, 5 to 10 entrepreneurs. That's a lot of information, right? And that's happening day after day after day. And so sometimes, decompression for me is not, relaxing or going on a vacation. It's just trying to get to that place. Do you remember when you were a kid and you kind of had nothing to do and you had to figure out how to entertain yourself? I mean, maybe now it's a little different with everyone's like has their devices on there 24/7, but just to kind of let yourself decompress into that almost bored state. And for me, that's how I recharge. And I don't know, it's kind of wacky, but it works for me.
I love this so much. I mean, it's like when we get ideas in the shower, it's like I like to listen to podcasts from time to time in the shower too, but it's nice to just be quiet too, because that's when all of a sudden things start to align and you start to have free space for ideas. You're like, oh, duh, because otherwise, yeah, it's so easy to be a consumer of information. And as a PR firm owner, I'm a creator as well, but it's just like, oh my gosh, I just need that space to be bored, to allow for ideas to coalesce and to, slide into their slots there. That is hard when life is very noisy day in and day out.
There's so much info coming our way. I live in New York City, always going out, like so much excitement, and I love it. I thrive on it. And then I have moments where you just need to retreat. So I don't know, for anyone listening, sometimes you don't need to, go on a silent retreat or do all these things. Like you can kind of just create your own moment of mental silence that doesn't involve like going to a yoga class or something like that.
Right. So. I love it. For the space to be bored.
Exactly.
Are you creating anything right now? Anything coming down the pipe for the business that you're pumped about?
Yeah, what's fun about Everywhere Ventures is, on the surface, you think it's a venture firm, but it's really a startup, right? So the idea sprung while my co-founder and I were working at other funds, actually. And we came up with this idea and we bootstrapped it and we kind of iterated and tested it. And so that's what we love to do. And so we're always kind of launching new things, new ideas. We have this short little book that we're publishing and, some new projects. And so what's fun about Everywhere Ventures is like we get to create the venture fund of the future, and we don't think it looks like what it did 5 years ago or even what it looks like today. So we're always kind of iterating and changing and coming up with new ways to engage our founder community and to think about what the future of entrepreneurship looks like.
I'd love to be a fly on the wall. So as you think back to over the years through your various entrepreneurial paths, what's something that's happened in your business life where you felt like the rug got pulled out from underneath you and you thought, oh gosh, I am not sure that we're going to survive this. But it ultimately turned out to be one of the best things that could have happened.
Yeah. So my first startup was really tough. I didn't come from a startup environment. I'd worked in law and finance and, being just kind of thrown into it, I didn't have a lot of support, mentorship, resources. So I had to be, pretty scrappy and resourceful. And, there was times I'd come home at night and be like, I just don't know if I can keep on doing this. It was super hard. But I think, looking back, obviously in the moment, it felt really tough, but looking back, just the resilience that you build. And I call, in my book that I just published, I call this concept like elasticity. So, just that ability to adapt and interact with, what's happening currently, I think is a skill that is hard to teach, and that you just have to learn by going through tough times, right? How will you respond? How will you bounce back? Will you kind of crumble? And I think, when you run a startup, you really get those principles get tested. And if you can kind of break through and actually that startup, my first one was quite successful. We had a lot of dark times where we didn't think we were going to make it, but every day we got back up and we just kept on going. And that kind of perseverance, I think that key characteristic is really so important in entrepreneurship.
And did you end up exiting that startup through selling?
Yeah. So our first startup, we were acquired by a larger company. So I went through the M&A process, learned a lot through that well. But yes, we did.
Congratulations. Do you have another startup in you, or are you going to ride Everywhere all the way through?
Yeah. Everywhere Ventures is the startup. And I think the venture capital, kind of community is really in a moment right now. Because again, as I mentioned, there's not a lot of liquidity in the system. The bigger funds are soaking up so much of the capital. And so the smaller funds really have to get creative and figure out where they're going to raise their next fund, how they're going to differentiate themselves, how they're going to compete with these huge funds that have massive marketing budgets and huge fancy offices and can give, tons of term sheets to founders. So I think there's a little bit of an existential moment happening in venture. And while that maybe scares a lot of people, it kind of excites me. And I think with everything that's happening in AI and automation, the venture fund of the future is being built right now. And it's really an exciting moment.
I can see that for sure. When you were a kid, did you have a little business when you were a kid as well, or accidental entrepreneurship happened later?
Well, I didn't have a business, but I was, very interested in travel. I went on this, very incredible trip with my grandmother, this train trip throughout Europe when I was a young child, and I was kind of encouraged to wander and explore. And so I was kind of obsessed with, travel and trips. And even though I really wasn't going many places, I, built this little group of other kids who were very excited about entrepreneurship, and we would look through atlases. And, we were just, excited about, what the world was, even though we were obviously living in a small myopic place.
Right. I remember when I was in 5th grade and learning about ancient Egypt, I was just like, what?
Oh my gosh. It's very funny that you say that, because in my book, I have a chapter on Egypt, and I talk about how we had these projects, and I made an actual Egyptian temple made out of sugar cubes, because it was you had to use what was already in your house or something like this. And I made this elaborate, temple, Egyptian temple made out of sugar cubes, and really kind of imagined, that one day I would live in Egypt and, have this very, very different life. So I love that you mentioned that.
Yeah.
It's so funny.
Oh yeah. No, I was so captivated by the whole process of being the pharaohs and the afterlife and everything. I just it hooked me big time. Well, when you were a kid building sugar cube temples, was there a personality trait of yours that you were criticized for, or that you made to feel like was a weakness, but now as a successful founder you realize it's actually a superpower?
Yeah, I mean, I think you need a little bit of grit to, be the person that's a little bit different. And I always was the person, as I said, the agitator, the person that thought a little different. And I think you're not always going to go with the flow. And so, having that grit, or in the book, I call it Moxie, right? Just that little bit of saltiness, I think is something that's not really celebrated in the United States. And
especially in our girls.
Especially in our girls, right? And especially in young kids, you're supposed to just kind of be delightful and go with the flow. And I think if you're the person that is always asking the question why, and you dig your heels in, and it kind of manifests in different ways. But I think that it was a characteristic that I developed. Don't necessarily know if you're born with these things or you develop it and nurture it. So that's a discussion for another podcast. But it was definitely something that was actually nurtured, and I think somewhat encouraged in my community. And so, I've seen that kind of play out as always being the person who, maybe didn't go with the flow and kind of was okay with it.
I love that. I have a spicy daughter, and I'm like, oh man, how do I nurture all these wonderful qualities of yours while also getting you ready for school on time? How can we do all of this together and also not make me want to leap out of the window? Okay, so what's a piece of advice you have for our listeners to make their lives and businesses stronger and better today?
So, I mean, 2 of them. One is that there's so much interesting technology around, AI right now. And if you can fortify your business using these tools, you're going to be really ahead of the game. And so I would encourage everyone to educate themselves, have fun, explore, play around with it. And, there's some really interesting things that even small business owners can incorporate into their business. So I would encourage that for sure to make a more resilient business. And the second thing I would say is that if you're interested in exploring entrepreneurship, there seems to be like this misperception that, you need to like quit your job and, start this thing. And it's like, there's small ways that everyone can be an entrepreneur. And so I encourage people, as I did, nights and weekends building my first startup while I had a full-time job at JP Morgan. I encourage everyone to kind of think about, what their side businesses are, their side hustle. And maybe one day the side hustle will become the main hustle.
Yeah, love that. On that AI piece, if I can put you on the spot for a moment, are there any particular tools or technologies that you are loving in your own business, or you feel like it's a small lift for a big transformation?
Yeah. I mean, many small businesses are built on kind of the Google suite, right? So they use the G Suite tools. And now you can integrate Gemini, which is their LLM, into that. So as you're writing, you have the boost of automation. As you're creating a slide deck, you can put images in like automatically. So I'm really enjoying, Gemini as much as I use, I think Perplexity is amazing and ChatGPT 4, but the integration with Google, because we run our whole business, on Google Workspace, has really been powerful for us running our fund.
Okay. We'll check that out. We are also on Google, so I will have to.
Yeah. So check out, get the Gemini integration, and you'll see in each, and all the different areas that you use, how it can like supercharge what you're doing. So I've been impressed.
Cool. Yeah. I've been seeing it's like old school Clippy in Word where it's like, can I help you with this? I'm like, no, go away. But
look at when you have Google Slides. Yeah. So I was creating a slide deck. And now you can literally just type in, like, I'd like the image of the galaxy and, a woman falling from a star. And literally, like, it'll pop up and you can just have it in your deck, as opposed to how you used to have to search and copy it and find it and do all that stuff. Now it's actually in the deck. And I thought, wow, that doesn't just make my life easier, but like, how fun and cool is that? As I'm like, being creative, kind of thinking about what it is, I can test different visuals as well. So I really enjoy that.
That's a great tip as someone who spends a lot of time in Adobe stock and wanting to not spend so much time.
You're going to love it. It's a little, they've just added it. So in your Google Slides, there's just like a little button on the top, like hunt around for it. And you'll see like, visual generator or something, and it'll come up. You're going to really like it.
I'll play with that. Thank you. All right. Wrapping up, where to find you?
I'm very active on LinkedIn. Okay. So, love for people to find me there. And my website, jennyfielding.com. You can learn more about me and, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Jenny. It's been great to have you. Excited for what's ahead for all your VC clients.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to The Impatient Entrepreneur. Love the podcast? Be sure to share it with a friend or colleague and give us a 5-star review. You can also chat with us on Instagram or Facebook at The Impatient Entrepreneur Pod. Want to star on a feature episode? Head over to theimpatiententrepreneur.com to inquire. Thank you to the team at Quidar & Co. for believing in me and bringing this podcast to life. And thank you to Carson Childers for mixing and editing this episode. I can't wait to see you next time.